So you can understand even more so why he would want to step away and not focus on fighting or defending his title, because obviously there's a lot going on. It's extremely sad.
The news of his exit might...
So check this out. The MMA world just got hit with some absolutely massive news that's got everyone talking. Ilia Topuria, this unstoppable force, who's been tearing through two divisions like they were nothing, just announced he's stepping back from defending his UFC lightweight belt. Now listen, this announcement by itself would be huge news. But when you hear the actual reason why he's doing this, it's going to completely blow your mind. Trust me when I say this story goes way deeper than anyone expected.
Some news regarding Ilia Topuria, because I do think that as of this morning, it's probably the biggest news of the day. So obviously by now you know that he is not fighting on January 24th.
The shocking what just dropped in the MMA community is honestly unprecedented. I'm talking about the kind of story that completely changes everything you thought you knew. We're watching one of the most devastating situations unfold for a reigning champion that the sport has ever witnessed. This whole thing started as quiet rumors floating around behind the scenes, but now it's erupted into the most shocking development in recent UFC memory. The kind of situation that reminds you just how fast everything can crumble in this business. Breaking news.
So over the past several weeks, I've made the difficult decision to temporarily step away from defending my title. This was not a decision I took lightly. However, when circumstances arise that threaten your personal integrity, your family, and your reputation, there comes a point when you must address them directly. In recent months, I have been subjected to severe and unacceptable pressure, including threats to disseminate false allegations of domestic abuse unless financial demands were met. These allegations are entirely unfounded. The truth is not a matter of opinion, it is a matter of evidence.
November 27th, 2025 rolls around and Topuria drops this bombshell on social media that had everyone's jaws hitting the floor. His post was straight to the point, but loaded with meaning. First quarter of next year? Not happening for fights. The reason he gave hit everyone right in the gut too, going through some serious personal stuff right now, need to focus on my kids and get this mess sorted out. That's when people knew something major was going down behind the scenes. Nobody had any clue just how dark this situation really was. The MMA community started going crazy with theories. Maybe it's the pressure of holding two belts finally catching up. Could be money issues with the UFC brass, but what was actually happening was so much worse than anybody imagined. The fighter support came pouring in immediately, though. Max Holloway, the guy Topuria had knocked out cold during his featherweight run, stepped up with a message that really said something. Sorry to hear about this, champ. If it's what I think it is, I've been there trying to keep your kids safe. That tells you everything about what kind of situation we're dealing with. When Holloway says he knows the struggle of protecting your children, you know this isn't about training camps or contract negotiations. December 15th, 2025 changes everything completely. Topuria releases this statement that exposes exactly what's been eating at him, and when I say exposes, I mean he pulled back the curtain on something absolutely devastating. Ariel Helwani broke it down piece by piece on his show, making sure everyone understood the gravity of what was happening.
So that's heavy-duty stuff. Obviously, we knew that he was going through some personal issues, and there's rumors online, and I didn't want to partake in any of those. I had not heard any of this. I had not heard any of these allegations or rumors, innuendo, any of that. And so you can understand even more so why he would want to step away and not focus on fighting or defending his title, because obviously there's a lot going on. It's extremely sad. It's, I feel for everyone involved. I feel for his family. I feel for his kids. It's an awful situation.
Here's what Topuria is claiming went down, and this is where things get really serious. Someone's been trying to extort him with threats of spreading fake domestic abuse allegations unless he pays up big money. We're talking about accusations that can destroy someone's entire life in today's world. This whole nightmare coincides with his messy separation and custody battle with his ex-wife Georgina Uzcategui-Bidel, who's the mother of his daughter. Spanish media outlets have been covering how their relationship completely imploded in late. All the classic signs were there. Unfollowing each other on social media, deleting all their couple photos, the works. Then came reports of a brutal divorce proceeding involving serious money and a nasty custody fight. When you look at everything Topuria is dealing with right now, the legal warfare, custody battles, extortion threats, plus trying to be a UFC champion, you can see why stepping away was his only choice. How do you train for elite-level competition with all that chaos destroying your life?
My initial decision to remain silent was made solely to protect my children, who are the most important part of my life. However, I've come to understand that silence, under these circumstances, does not protect the truth. It allows false narratives to take hold. Many individuals have faced similar situations, and time and again, the legal system has ultimately clarified the facts. Today, I'm stepping forward, not only for my family and myself, but also to demonstrate that no one should be forced to yield to intimidation.
The timeline of this relationship falling apart tells the whole story. October 6th, 2025, they start scrubbing their social media of each other, which is always the first warning sign something's wrong. Week later, Georgina posts this cryptic message that makes way more sense now. Something about a mother's real power being able to create a world where her daughter grows up fearless and safe. People were scratching their heads about what that meant, but now it's crystal clear. November 10th hits, and Georgina officially files for divorce, reportedly going after half of everything Topuria owns. Given his status as a two-division champ with endorsement deals, that's serious money we're talking about. 2 days after that, the infidelity stories start hitting Spanish tabloids, with Georgina claiming the breakup happened because Topuria was messaging other women, which she completely denies. But Topuria isn't just sitting there taking these hits. His December 15th statement revealed he's been building a case to fight back. Every conversation recorded, every text message saved, witness statements lined up, video evidence preserved, all of it handed over to Spanish authorities to file charges for extortion, evidence tampering, financial crimes, and threats. The reason he stayed quiet initially wasn't fear or weakness. He was trying to keep his children out of the public mess and handle it like an adult should.
Well, I got something for you. It's called the Wife Beater Special. That's right. I got my wife beater on for Ilia Topuria. That puts his hands on a woman. You know, I grew up without a dad. You know, never seen my dad, never will see my dad. And you know what? I'd rather not see my dad than have my dad there beating on my mom. Let me tell you something, what that'll get you killed.
The reaction across MMA has been all over the place. Some fighters are rallying behind Topuria, seeing him as someone fighting against blackmail and extortion. Others are questioning whether this announcement is just strategic timing during a divorce proceeding. Bryce Mitchell jumped in immediately, taking the ex-wife's side and going hard after Topuria on social media. Mitchell even called out Topuria's brother Alejandro for a fight, saying he'd drop down to bantamweight to settle this in the octagon. But while fighters are busy picking sides without knowing the facts, the UFC has a business to run and a lightweight division that's now in complete chaos.
I think a lot of people were surprised that you were not fighting in the first quarter, at least. But how is it with the UFC? Are they understanding? Because obviously all the fighters can go through problems such as what you are going through. How understanding was Hunter and the other people involved? The truth is, Ilia says they have been excellent. We have a special connection. I have understanding without having to give a lot of explanation, understanding from them. From the very first moment, they have extended their hand. I have been offered their support in any time I needed it. So I don't really know. I'm very happy for the support I've received from them, for the understanding.
Credit where it's due. The UFC has handled this situation with incredible support, according to Topuria himself. When he talks about how Hunter Campbell and the UFC leadership have treated him during this nightmare, he has nothing but praise. They've been understanding and supportive instead of making his life harder, which shows real class from the organization.
You do wonder, at some point, will they decide to make that interim belt the actual belt if he's not going to come back anytime soon? I don't think that they're going to be forced to do that for the January event. We'll see what kind of timeline he's on, how long this is going to play out. But if it's by next summer, perhaps they make that call.
But here's the million-dollar question everyone's asking right now. What happens to that lightweight belt while Topuria deals with legal battles that could drag on for months? The UFC had an answer ready fast. Interim lightweight title fight between Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett at UFC 3-1 January 24, 2026 at T-Mobile Arena. This announcement sent shockwaves through the division and sparked massive controversy about whether this is the right matchup. Let me break down why people are so upset about this. Justin Gaethje is 37 years old with a 25-5 record. former interim champ who beat Tony Ferguson back in 2020 before losing the unification to Khabib in his retirement fight. Known for violent fan-friendly wars, power punching, brutal leg kicks, and never backing down from anyone, Paddy Pimblett is 30 years old from Liverpool, 21-3 record, undefeated in UFC with 6 straight wins since joining the promotion. His personality combined with solid grappling and improving striking makes him one of those fighters people either love or absolutely hate. Here's where the controversy explodes though. Arman Tsarukyan, the clear #1 contender with dominant wins, including a massive victory over Charles Oliveira and a recent submission of Dan Hooker, got completely passed over for this title shot. Tsarukyan is furious about it and isn't staying quiet. He's calling this whole interim booking a setup to push Pimblett into a money fight with Topuria, claiming they're trying to make Pimblett a star because they know Tsarukyan would beat everyone. Pimblett himself has been warning that Topuria could get stripped entirely if his absence stretches into summer 2026, which is very possible given these legal complications.
So basically, Topuria says, oh, I'm going to spoil the UFC's plans, which Justin Gaethje has acknowledged the fact the UFC clearly wants Topuria versus Paddy. And Topuria basically says, oh, well, I'm probably not fighting Justin Gaethje if he wins. Look at that. If Justin Gaethje wins, the subtitles are kind of covered up here, the UFC has different plans. Watch that again. Watch that again. I know most of you don't speak Spanish. But if Justin Gaethje wins, the UFC has different plans.
The timeline Helwani discussed is crucial for understanding what comes next. Topuria's last fight was winning the title from Charles Oliveira at UFC 317 in June 2025. A summer 2026 return would mean roughly 1 year away from competition. UFC's informal policy usually expects champions to defend at least once every 12 to 18 months or risk getting stripped. But what's really interesting is what Topuria's hinting about his future plans. Multiple sources close to the situation say if Gaethje wins that interim title in January, Topuria might just vacate voluntarily and chase a welterweight fight against Islam Makhachev instead of unifying the lightweight belts. Reports suggest Topuria's main interest is fighting Pimblett in a massive money fight. Not necessarily the most deserving contender rankings-wise. Their rivalry goes back to UFC 317 where Topuria shoved Pimblett during an in-octagon confrontation after knocking out Oliveira, creating bad blood that's been building ever since.
Did he vacate the belt, or did you guys say, if you're moving to lightweight, then we don't want to hold up the featherweight division?
No, he did that. He said, I've done everything I can do here. I'm ready to move up. And he vacated it. He said, I shouldn't be holding up anybody's opportunities. And, you know, it's always, I respect when guys do that.
Looking at UFC history, there's precedent for how they handle these situations. Conor McGregor became the first simultaneous two-division champion in November 2016 after destroying Eddie Alvarez, then got stripped of his featherweight title just 1 month later when he showed no intention of defending it. His lightweight title lasted until April 2018, when after over 500 days of inactivity chasing boxing and other ventures, they stripped him and crowned Khabib as undisputed champion. This isn't Topuria's first time giving up a belt either. Back in February 2025, he vacated his featherweight title voluntarily, not because the UFC forced him to. Dana White explained it was entirely Topuria's decision, respecting the champion's choice to move up in weight. Topuria cited brutal weight cuts as his main reason, explaining that walking around at 190 pounds made cutting to 145 increasingly dangerous for his health. He won the vacant lightweight title at UFC 317 on June 28, 2025, knocking out Charles Oliveira in the first round with a devastating combination that shocked everyone watching. That victory made him the 10th fighter in UFC history to hold championships in 2 separate weight classes and the first unbeaten fighter to achieve two-division champion status, which is historic. But now with Topuria sidelined indefinitely dealing with serious personal and legal matters, and an in title fight coming in January, everyone's wondering if the lightweight champion will ever return to defend his belt, or if he has bigger plans that could take him away from MMA completely.
Topuria has felt like he's done all that he can in that division, and he feels like he's cemented his legacy, and his body cannot make the weight anymore, so Topuria will be moving up to 155 pounds and will be vacating the featherweight title.
Now let's address what everyone's thinking but nobody wants to say directly. Will we ever see Ilia Topuria fight in the UFC again? The answer is way more complicated than you'd think, because there are multiple factors beyond just the legal situation. Based on recent interviews Topuria's given over the past several months, he's made it crystal clear that his MMA time is limited. He's viewing this as a temporary career, not a lifelong pursuit. In fact, he's openly stated multiple times that he wants to transition to professional boxing sooner rather than later, following other MMA fighters who've made that jump.
This is the most damning part. Don't be surprised if Topuria says goodbye to MMA. I don't think I'll stay in MMA too long. It's no secret I always wanted to go and test my skills in boxing. I wanted to finish my story in MMA first. I'll make my transition to boxing, and I'm going to surprise a lot of people. I mean, we kind of knew this. Topuria's been talking about this forever. He's been saying, I'm taking the Conor McGregor route.
Let me break down what Topuria's long-term plans actually look like based on everything he said publicly. After capturing the lightweight title at UFC 317, Topuria immediately started pushing for a super fight with Islam Makhachev, who had just vacated the lightweight belt to move up to welterweight himself. Topuria framed this potential matchup as a legacy-defining Triple Crown achievement, explaining that becoming the first fighter in UFC history to win titles in 3 weight classes would cement his place among the greatest ever. When Makhachev successfully claimed the welterweight title in November 2025 with a dominant decision victory over Jack Della Maddalena at UFC 322 showing he could compete at higher weight, Topuria escalated his callouts. He publicly criticized Makhachev's performance as boring and lacking emotion, confidently predicting he would put Makhachev to sleep if they ever fought. Parallel to these MMA aspirations, Topuria has increasingly emphasized his exit from the sport to pursue boxing, talking about it more in recent interviews. In a December 2025 interview with Marca, a major Spanish sports publication, he stated plainly that his MMA career would not last too long, explaining a philosophy of not chasing 2 rabbits at once. He intends to fully conclude his UFC story and accomplish everything he wants before dedicating himself exclusively to boxing. Not everyone believes this boxing transition will work or even be realistic, given the completely different skill sets required.
Ilia Topuria saying that he wants to go into boxing and just completely be done with MMA soon, yeah, that's a little bit worrying. First of all, Ilia is not going to be a world-level championship boxer. I hate to break it to you. I know I'm an MMA fan, but at the end of the day, boxers are so good at what they do because they master the sweet spot science. They master the sport of boxing. They spend their entire lives just boxing, whereas Ilia boxes, kicks, wrestles, does jiu-jitsu, elbows, knees. There is so much that goes into MMA that you don't have the time to focus on just one martial.
The implications of Topuria's boxing ambitions are staggering when you think about the timeline. Topuria has openly stated in multiple interviews that he plans to retire from MMA between ages 30 and 32, which is relatively young for a fighter. He's currently 28 years old, turning 29 in just a couple weeks, which means the clock is already ticking. If you do the math, that means we might only have 2 or 3 more fights from Topuria at most before he walks away from the octagon forever.
He has openly said, I plan to retire between the ages of 30 and 32. I want my first defense to be October or November. It ended up being October. And he wants to retire between the age of 30 and 32. So essentially, he's already 29. He only plans on fighting Paddy if Paddy beats Justin Gaethje. Best case scenario, he fights Paddy in maybe July, I would say. That'd be the best case scenario. So now he's halfway to 30, and he says he wants to retire around 30, 32. Well, does that include boxing?
Let's talk about what this means for Topuria's legacy and the lightweight division's stability moving forward. As of late November 2025, before all this chaos erupted, Topuria held the number 2 spot in UFC men's pound-for-pound rankings, trailing only welterweight champion Islam Makhachev. He briefly held the number 1 position after his spectacular knockout of Oliveira at UFC 317, with many arguing he deserved to stay there. His legacy is the 10th 2-division champion with a perfect 17-0 record that includes wins over elite competition and spectacular knockouts over Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, and Charles Oliveira, remains elite level no matter what happens. However, having 0 lightweight title defenses invites paper champ criticisms from haters, potentially tarnishing his reign compared to multi-defense greats like Khabib, who defended his title 3 times before retiring. The mental toll of this situation cannot be understated either. While Topuria hasn't explicitly used terms like depression or anxiety in his statements, the language in his announcements paints a picture of significant emotional distress. Someone who's really struggling, the burden of protecting his children while combating what he calls manipulated narratives and false allegations has clearly affected his ability to focus on fighting at the highest level. When asked about his return timeline in a recent interview, Topuria made it clear that his family comes first, above everything else, and he has no concrete date for when he'll be back.
That you'll fight in January. When would you like to fight? When you feel it's time to return? Well, Ilia says, as I've communicated, I'm going through some personal problems. I do not have an exact date when everything will be fixed. I hope that as soon as possible, as soon as it is solved, I will be ready to go back. In the octagon, I prioritize at this time the welfare of my family, of my children, my own. So as soon as everything is solved, I will be back to the octagon to give it the show.
The support from the MMA community has been mixed, with some showing compassion and others questioning everything. Everyone deserves due process and the presumption of innocence until proven otherwise in court. The situation has drawn comparisons to other UFC fighters who've paused their careers for personal reasons, showing this isn't completely unprecedented. Sean O'Malley, for instance, announced a break in September 2024 following his title loss to Merab Dvalishvili at UFC 306, citing a need to recharge mentally after an intense run as bantamweight champion. Then there's that Nelk Boys clip that keeps resurfacing in discussions about Tupuria's marriage troubles. During an interview on their podcast, Topuria mentioned casually that he met his wife in Miami, and the Nelk Boys' reaction created an incredibly awkward moment that many now view as foreshadowing of the relationship problems to come.
Actually, I met my wife in Miami.
Really?
Yeah, she was living there.
Damn. Who says you can't meet your wife in Miami?
But you can find your wife in any place in the world.
You hear that? Put that on Only in Date on Instagram. You can meet your wife in Miami.
Alright, let's roll.
Put it on Only in Date is hilarious.
Everywhere. But why are you saying that?
Huh?
Why?
Many observers have pointed to this awkward exchange as evidence that warning signs about Tupuria's relationship may have been visible for some time, and that the current situation was perhaps inevitable, given how they met and the dynamics involved. So where do we go from here? What's the realistic path forward for everyone involved? The timeline for Tupuria's return remains anchored to no activity through Q1 2026, meaning the earliest we'd see him is April at the absolute soonest, with Q2 starting in April as the earliest realistic window if his legal resolution happens quickly. If his legal delays extend beyond 12-18 months from his June 2025 last fight, forced vacancy becomes likely, promoting the interim winner to undisputed status and completely reshaping contender queues throughout the division. The harsh reality is that even in the best-case scenario where everything resolves perfectly, we're looking at a very limited number of fights remaining in Tupuria's MMA career, based on his own stated timeline.
I would bet my life the best case scenario for Ilia Topuria would be 2 more fights, maybe 3. I'd be shocked if we got 3 more fights from Ilia Topuria, unless he were to somehow lose, like a fluke injury or something. If he goes out there, if you fight, let's say Patty beats Justin Gaethje, I'm predicting Patty to win right now. So hypothetically, Patty beats Gaethje, Topuria fights Patty mid-2026, which is already a disgrace that we got to wait over a year for that fight to happen. Who's he going to fight after that? He's not fighting Arman. Dana White has already made that quite clear. It's already a sham belt. We're not fighting the number 1 contender. Then I think he's going to probably try to get the Islam fight. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't.
The bottom line is this, and I cannot stress this enough. We are witnessing what could be the beginning of the end for one of the most talented fighters to ever step into the octagon. Someone who had all the tools to dominate for years. Whether Topuria emerges from these legal battles vindicated or not, the damage to his career trajectory is undeniable, and the momentum has been completely lost. The lightweight division hangs in limbo, with no clear champion actively defending. Contenders like Zarkan frustrated and vocal about being passed over, and fans left wondering if they'll ever see the undefeated champion compete again at his highest level. As Topuria himself wrote in his powerful statement, the truth does not require volume, it requires facts. suggesting he has evidence to back up everything he's claiming. Only time will tell what those facts reveal when they come out in court, and whether Ilia Topuria will ever return to defend the championship he fought so hard to earn.
I'll tell you guys this right now. To quote Dean Thomas, Ilia Topuria is a disaster for the lightweight division. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope something changes.